What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to our Bible study and slight adult content disclaimer thing again. Just in case, you had the idea of watching this with a child or having your child watch this. Yeah, maybe don't. But then again, is there really a better place, time, way to expose a child to these kinds of things than through reading from the Bible? That's up to you. But anyway, so yeah, just putting that little disclaimer out there before we get into things. All right, so we have got Leviticus chapter 20 lined up. Again, kind of general theme of the book seems to be about cleanliness and purity, especially as it pertains to God's standard of holiness, righteousness, cleanliness, and purity, and all that kind of stuff. So we've gotten into a bunch of different, rules that God has laid out for his people. Most of the time, it's just been maybe a brief mention of consequences or punishments, especially if it's been a real simple, all right, well, you do this, you're exiled from my people, or something along those lines. But it seems like we're going to get a little bit more into some punishments for breaking some of these rules in this particular chapter. So, anyway, let's hop right in here. Leviticus chapter 20. The Lord said to Moses, "Give the people of Israel these instructions, which apply both to native Israelites and to the foreigners living in Israel. If any of them offer their children as a sacrifice to Moloch, they must be put to death. The people of the community must stone them to death. I myself will turn against them and cut them off from the community, because they have defiled my sanctuary and brought shame on my holy name by offering their children to Moloch. And if the people of the community ignore those who offer their children to Moloch and refuse to execute them, I myself will turn against them and their families and will cut them off from the community. This will happen to all who commit spiritual prostitution by worshiping Moloch." Okay, so we talked a little bit about Moloch in, I forget if it was chapter 19 or 18, but a recent chapter, and I did a little bit of digging, didn't really seem to turn up a whole lot, other than just that, child sacrifices were fairly common related to Moloch. And, as far as we've seen, human sacrifice is not something that has been supported by God, and this would seem to be a pretty obvious statement against those kinds of things, especially child sacrifice, because, one of the earliest commands God gave in the Bible was, be fruitful and multiply. Plus, if God is wanting to build his, people and establish them and, help them develop and grow, then them sacrificing their own children runs counter to that, because you're messing up future generations. So basically, the punishment for sacrificing to Moloch is death by stoning. And anyone who refuses to act upon that would, at the very least, be cut off from the community, it seems. And the phrase spiritual prostitution there just struck me a little bit. But I mean, just like in a marriage or other, human relationship like that, we'll just say marriage, you're supposed to stick with your wife or spouse, and be loyal to them. If you go running off with somebody else who's not your spouse and, engaging in things with them that you should only be doing with your spouse, then that's bad. And I think, God is equating worship and or sacrifice to Molech as a similar kind of thing, because the Israelites are supposed to be loyal to God, and if they aren't, then they're basically just giving themselves away to any other god. So, moving on to verse 6. I will also turn against those who commit spiritual prostitution by putting their trust in mediums or in those who consult the spirits of the dead. I will cut them off from the community. So set yourselves apart to be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Keep all my decrees by putting them into practice, for I am the Lord who makes you holy. Anyone who dishonors father or mother must be put to death. Such a person is guilty of a capital offense. Okay, I'm going to pause there real quick. Also, similar thought process behind consulting mediums, because here's, their trust is supposed to be in God and his direction and guidance. And if they're trying to consult, other pseudo-spiritual forces for advice or guidance or anything like that, then they weren't relying on God. So it's a similar idea that they're not being faithful to the Lord. And, once again, we have kind of this sentence here about them being holy because God is holy, like as sort of the standard that God has for his people. Because if they're going to represent him, then they should be as much like him as possible. Footnote there, dishonors. Greek version reads, anyone who speaks disrespectfully of. I feel like I kind of like the word dishonor better, because, you can dishonor your parents by more than just words. Although maybe not necessarily every action that could dishonor your parents would qualify this. So, maybe it's like intentional dishonor. So, anyway. And punishment for that is death, which, especially nowadays, we would probably deem quite severe. I don't know how far they took, dishonor in this case, and, if it was meant as more than just a simple little thing here and there. Because I'm sure they understood children are children. They don't necessarily all, no matter how many times you tell them something, they're not necessarily always going to obey that. So maybe just beyond the normal limits is what this is talking about. But anyway, I need to stop rambling on and speculating about one little phrase. But those are just my thoughts on it. I thought I would put that out there. Anyway, on to verse 10. If a man commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both the man and the woman who have committed adultery must be put to death. If a man violates his father by having sex with one of his father's wives, both the man and the woman must be put to death, for they are guilty of a capital offense. If a man has sex with his daughter-in-law, both must be put to death. they have committed a perverse act and are guilty of a capital offense. If a man practices homosexuality, having sex with another man as with a woman, both men have committed a detestable act. They must both be put to death, for they are guilty of a capital offense. Okay, so a lot of these are kind of flashing back to just 1 or 2 chapters ago, but now it's going over the punishments for disobeying those things. And all are of equal punishment so far. In fact, all the punishments that have been mentioned in this chapter so far have been death, other than maybe the whole, like, not stopping someone else from, sacrificing to Molech, or, carrying out the punishment that they're due. But, yeah. Needless to say, pretty high, strict standards here. But again, if they're going to be holy to any effect as God is, and representing him in that way, high standards, yeah, for sure. Verse 14. If a man marries both a woman and her mother, he has committed a wicked act. The man and both women must be burned to death to wipe out such wickedness from among you. Burned to death specifically. Interesting. If a man has sex with an animal, he must be put to death, and the animal must be killed. If a woman presents herself to a male animal to have intercourse with it, she and the animal must both be put to death. You must kill both, for they are guilty of a capital offense. If a man marries his sister, the daughter of either his father or his mother, and they have sexual relations, it is a shameful disgrace. They must be publicly cut off from the community. Since the man has violated his sister, he will be punished for his sin. Okay, so that's another one that doesn't necessarily have death as the punishment for it. But I will kind of paraphrase a reference back to chapter 18. A lot of these sexual sins in particular were ones that the people of Canaan, that at this point in the Bible, God is driving out of that land. These are acts they're guilty of. And, God is specifically warning against these, A, because he doesn't like it. It's, the reason he's driving the people out. And B, because, any leftover people that did these kinds of things, whenever, the Israelites happen to get there, they're going to encounter these people who followed these practices in all likelihood, at least some of them. So it's a specific warning saying, hey, you're probably going to see these people doing this. This is bad. Don't do it. Don't get caught up in their ways. I'm driving them out for this reason. So, anyway. Where did we leave it off? I think we did verse 17. Yeah. So, verse 18. If a man has sexual relations with a woman during her menstrual period, both of them must be cut off from the community, for together they have exposed the source of her blood flow. Do not have sexual relations with your aunt, whether your mother's sister or your father's sister. This would dishonor a close relative. Both parties are guilty and will be punished for their sin. Doesn't explain what the punishment is, though. You would assume either being cut off from the community or death. Those have been all the previous punishments. Anyway, verse 20. If a man has sex with his uncle's wife, he has violated his uncle. Both the man and the woman will be punished for their sin, and they will die childless. So it seems like the punishment is death there. If a man marries his brother's wife, it is an act of impurity. he has violated his brother, and the guilty couple will remain childless. See, now the wording of that makes it less obvious that the punishment would be death. I don't know. Anyway, verse 22. You must keep all my decrees and regulations by putting them into practice. Otherwise, the land to which I am bringing you as your new home will vomit you out. Do not live according to the customs of the people I am driving out before you. It is because they do these shameful things that I detest them. But I have promised you, you will possess their land because I will give it to you as your possession, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has set you apart from all other people. So further reiterating the reasons why those previous commands are to be followed and why God's people should not do those things. And also reaffirming a little bit the promise that God made to them about, living in the land they're about to possess. Verse 25. You must therefore make a distinction between ceremonially clean and unclean animals, and between clean and unclean birds. You must not defile yourselves by eating any unclean animal or bird or creature that scurries along the ground. I have identified them as being unclean for you. You must be holy because I, the Lord, am holy. I have set you apart from all other people to be my very own. Men and women among you who act as mediums or who consult the spirits of the dead must be put to death by stoning. They are guilty of a capital offense. Kind of an odd spot to have that. You would think it should have been up here with other mentions of mediums and whatnot. But obviously, if consulting a medium is punishable by death, then acting as one is punishable by death. And again, further reiterating God's standard for them, specifically right there in connection with, clean and unclean animals, which we also established previously in Leviticus. But that's really all the more thoughts I have on this chapter specifically. Okay, so that does it for Leviticus chapter 20, and kind of just had some general rules that were a bit varied, and the corresponding punishments. There haven't necessarily been punishments listed for every command that's been given so far, but they were bound to come eventually. Anyway, yeah, guess really that's kind of the general gist of what was in this chapter. Not really a particular theme that held all of it together, other than the obvious thing of okay, God didn't want his people doing these things because the other people around them did these things, and that's why God was going to drive them out. So, anyway, as always, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, share it with others if you want them to see, subscribe to my channel to get more videos, click the bell to get updates when I post new ones. Look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and where to find those, and leave comments below that with any thoughts you have, whether it's on this chapter, other Bible stuff, any other video ideas, whatever you have for me. Let me know down below. So that's it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.